Reading from the New Living Translation by Mrs. Patricia Santi, reading Ezekiel chapter 40, the new temple area. On April 28, during the 25th year of our captivity, 14 years after the fall of Jerusalem, the Lord took hold of me in a vision from God. He took me to the land of Israel and set me down on a very high mountain. From there, I could see towards the south and what appeared to be a city. As he brought me nearer, I saw a man whose face shone like bronze standing beside a gateway entrance. He was holding in his hand a linen measure cord and a measuring rod. He said to me, "Son of man, watch and listen. Pay close attention to everything I show you. You have been brought here so I can show you many things. Then you will return to the people of Israel and tell them everything you have seen." The east gateway, I could see a wall completely surrounding the temple area. The man took a measuring rod that was 10.5 feet long and measured the wall, and the wall was 10.5 feet thick and 10.5 feet high. Then he went over to the eastern gateway. He climbed the steps and measured the threshing hold of the gateway. It was 10.5 feet front to back. There was guard agloes on each side into the gateway passage. Each of these agloes was 10.5 feet square, with a distance between them of 8.34 feet long. Passage wall, the gateway's inner threshing hold, which led to the enter room at the inner end of the gateway passage, was 10.5 feet front to back. He also measured the room of the gateway. It was 14 feet across with supporting columns 3.5 feet thick. This entry room was set at the inner end of the gateway structure, facing towards the temple. There was 3 guard agloes on each side of the gateway passage. Each had the same measurement, and the dividing walls separating them were also identical. The man measured the gateway entrance, which was 17.5 feet wide at the opening and 22.34 feet wide in the gateway passage. In front of each of the guard agloes was a 21-inch crop. The agloes themselves were 10.5 feet on each side. Then he measured the entire width of the gateway, measuring the distance between the back wall of facing guard agloes. This distance was 43.34 feet. He measured the dividing walls all along the inside of the gateway up to the entire room of the gateway. This distance was 105 feet. The full length of the gateway passage was 87.5 feet from one end to the other. There were recessed windows that narrow inward through the walls of the guard agloes and their divided walls. There were also windows in the entire room. The surface of the dividing walls were decorated with carved palm trees. The outer courtyard. Then the man brought me through the gateway into the outer courtyard of the temple. A stone pavement ran along the walls of the courtyard, and 30 rooms were built against the walls opening onto the pavement. This pavement flanked the gate and extended out from the walls into the courtyard the same distance as the gateway entrance. This was the lower pavement. Then the man measured across the temple outer courtyard between the outer and the inner gateway. The distance was 175 feet. The north gateway, the man measured the gateway on the north just like the one on the east. Here too, there were 3 guard agloes on each side with dividing walls, and on enter room all the measurement matched those of the east gateway. The gateway passage was 87.5 feet long and 43 feet wide between the back wall and of the facing guard agloe. The walls, the enter room, and the palm trees decorated were identical to those in the east gateway. There were 7 steps leading up the gateway entrance, and the enter room was at the inner end of the gateway passage, here on the north side, just as on the east. There were another gateway leading to the temple inner courtyard directly opposite this gateway. The distance between the two gateways was 175 feet. The southern gateway. Then the man took me around to the south gateway and measured its various parts, and they were exactly the same as in the others. It had windows along the walls as the others did, and there were an enter room where the gateway passage opened into the outer courtyard, and like the other, the gateway passage was 87.5 feet long and 34 feet wide between the back wall of the facing guard agloe. This gateway also had a stairway of 7 steps leading up to it, and an enter room at the inner end and palm tree decorated along the dividing walls. And here again, directly opposite the outer gateway, was another gateway that led into the inner courtyard. The distance between the two gateways was 175 feet. Gateways to the inner courtyard. Then the man took me to the south gateway leading into the inner courtyard. He measured it, and it had the same measurement as the other gateway. It guard agloes, divide wall, and enter room were the same size as those in the other. It also had windows along its walls and 8 entrance room, and like the others, the gateway passage was 87.5 feet long and 34 feet wide. Then the enter room of the gateway leading into the inner courtyard were 14 feet across and 34 feet wide. The enter room to the south gateway faced into the outer courtyard. Its palm tree decorated on its columns, and there were 8 steps leading to the entrance. Then he took me to the eastern gateway leading to the inner courtyard. He measured it, and it had the same measurement as the other gateway. It guard agloes, dividing walls, and enter room were the same size as those of the others, and there were windows along the walls and in the enter room. The gateway passage measured 87.5 feet long and 34 feet wide. Its enter room faced into the outer courtyard. It had palm tree decorating on its column, and there were 8 steps leading to the entrance. Then he took me around to the north gateway leading to the inner courtyard. He measured it, and it had the same measurement as the other gateway. The guard agloe, dividing wall, and enter room of this gateway had the same measurement as in the others, and the same windows arrangement. The gateway passage measured 87.5 feet long and 43 and 34 feet wide. Its enter room facing into the outer courtyard, and it had palm trees decorations on the columns. There were 8 steps leading to the entrance. Rooms for preparing sacrifice all led from the enter room of one of the inner gateway into the side room where the meat for sacrifices were washed on each side of this enter room, where 2 tables where the sacrificial animal were slaughtered for the burnt offering, sin offering, and guilt offerings. Outside the enter room, and each side of the stairs go up to the north entrance were 2 more tables. So there were 8 tables in all, 4 inside and 4 outside. Sacrifice were cut up and prepared. There were also 4 tables of finished stone for preparation of the burnt offering, each 31.5 inches square and 21 inches high. On these tables were placed the butchering knives and other implements for slaughtering the sacrificial animals. There were hooks, each 3 inches long, fastened all around the floor wall. Sacrificial meat was laid on the tables. Room for the priest. Inside the inner courtyard were 2 rooms, one beside the north gateway facing south, and the other beside the south gateway facing north. And the man said to me, the room beside the north inner gate is for the priest who surveys the temple maintenance. The room beside the south inner gate is for the priest in charge of the altar, the descendant of Zadok, for they alone of all the Levites approach the Lord to minister to him. The inner courtyard and temple. Then the man measured the inner courtyard, and it was square, 175 feet wide and 175 feet across. The altar stood in the courtyard in front of the temple. Then he brought me to the enter room of the temple. He measured the wall on either side of the opening to the enter room, and they were 8.34 feet thick. The entrance itself was 24.5 feet wide, and the wall on each side of the entrance were an addition 5.5 feet long. The enter room was 35 feet wide and 21 feet deep. There were 10 steps leading up to it with columns on each side. Amen and amen.